Welcome to the fourth and final part of my recap of the HBO series Rome. Make sure to watch all of the previous parts on my channel. Be sure to like this video and subscribe for more content like this. Enjoy!
The episode begins with Brutus and Cassius on their march through Greece with their army of 100,000 soldiers to challenge Octavian. Cassius is worried about the grain supply for their army, whereas Brutus is cheerful, having spent time getting to know the men and jubilantly talking about saving the Republic. In Cisalpine Gaul, Mark Antony, Lepidus and Octavian are devising a plan to surprise Brutus and Cassius. They believe their enemies do not know that they are reunited and hope to overcome Brutus and Cassius with an unexpectedly large army. Octavian comes up with a list of supporters of Brutus in Rome and proposes to send the list to Lucius Vorenus and order him to have them killed. Lepidus objects to the killing of some of the most honorable men in Rome but is turned down by the prospect of the money the killing would bring to them. They resolve to march to Greece and leave Lepidus in Rome. In Rome, Lucius Vorenus divides up the names from the list among the gangs he controls. He makes them an offer to loot the houses of each victim and take as much as they can carry. Titus Pullo gets the order to kill Cicero, but Vorenus insists on no looting on this name to show some respect. He also asks the gang leaders about what to do with the expected wealth, and proposes to distribute fish and bread to the people as a gesture of goodwill by the Collegium. After some debate, and Memio speaking in favor of the proposal, it is accepted. Meanwhile, Vorenus' daughter Vorina is receiving gifts from a stranger whose ulterior motive is to woo her at Memio's order. While in Rome, Agrippa is greeted by Octavia, who reveals that she reciprocates his feelings for her, but Agrippa tries to dissuade her, stating that he is lowborn and can never marry Octavia. Regardless, the two begin a love affair that Atia recognizes but agrees to keep silent about. While Titus Pullo prepares for the killing of Cicero, he is teased by Gaia. When asked about it by his wife Irene, he suddenly proposes to take her and Vorenus and his whole family to the lovely countryside where Cicero is living. Just as the company starts their picnic, Titus and two men are leaving them to get their job done. While playing with his children, Vorenus wishes him good luck. Cicero receives news of Mark Antony and Octavian being reunited, and immediately begins scribbling a message to Brutus just as Titus Pullo arrives at the front door. He manages to finish the messages just before Pullo finds him. When Pullo enters, both men exchange pleasantries in an extraordinarily respectful manner. Cicero briefly tries to bribe Pullo, but he declines with a smile. Cicero asks for a few minutes to compose himself, and while he is watching, an eagle flies overhead. Pullo amicably asks for some of the peaches growing in the atrium of Cicero's estate, then executes him with a gladiatorial thrust down through the neck. The messenger Cicero sent is stopped by Vorenus, and almost killed for nearly trampling little Lucius, but then allowed to go on his way. He has, however, dropped his vital letter from Cicero, which Vorenus does not see, but the children find it and fold it into a paper crown. In Rome, Octavian and Posca are debating some additional names to be added to their killing list on the wishes of Mark Antony. When Octavian rejects them, stating he would prefer not to appear as a butcher, Agrippa leaves in disgust. Outside, Agrippa meets Octavia, and after solving some misunderstandings, they kiss for the first time and later have sex in a hired brothel room. The next day, Octavian and Agrippa set off with their troops to Greece to meet Brutus and Cassius. An assembly of Jews discusses the attempt of Herod to bribe the Romans, depending on which side wins the civil war. Levi, the brother of Timon, strongly objects to such plans. The assembly ends in a turmoil, with Levi jubilant at his alleged success and the fact that Timon has finally rejected his Roman ways and resumed his Jewish heritage. Titus Pullo is ashamed about not participating in Octavian's campaign because he feels himself to still be a soldier. Vorenus tries to console him, envisioning great things that they both could do, but Pullo remains wary. Later on, he discusses the topic with his wife Irene, but resolves to stay in Rome. Irene then reveals to Pullo that she is pregnant. Brutus and Cassius are in their camp near Philippi in Greece, and receive word from the scouts that the combined force of Mark Antony and Octavian is only a day's march away. Moreover, they are outnumbered, with their 14 legions to Octavian's and Antony's combined 19 legions. Cassius immediately orders to break camp and begin the retreat. Brutus objects and convinces Cassius to accept the battle, there and then, saying no more running. The armies are about to engage, and Mark Antony commences the fighting with the words, "Let's have some fun." In the ensuing bloodbath, Mark Antony and Octavian prevail. A mortally wounded Cassius is brought to Brutus, whose remaining forces begin to disintegrate. After Cassius dies, Brutus tells one of his soldiers to give his mother his best and to say something suitable. He then kisses his father's ring, looks to the gods, and resolves to go down fighting. He then strips off his armor, and walks alone towards the advancing forces of Mark Antony, wounding a single soldier before being felled. He dies in a fashion deliberately reminiscent of Caesar's assassination, being stabbed repeatedly by a surrounding mob of soldiers. Mark Antony and Octavian ride over the battlefield and indulge in their victory. They hope to recover the bodies of Brutus and Cassius, but only the latter is found. The former has had his ring looted by a local beggar as the two rode by unawares. Servilia mourns the death of Brutus, killed at Philippi. She kneels in front of Atia's door chanting repeatedly for justice. Although Atia ignores her initially, the incessant chanting attracts a crowd of pleb onlookers and annoys Atia. After 2 days, Atia gets fed up with Servilia's obstinacy and throws open the door to let Servilia vent her anger and leave. However, Servilia calls upon the gods to curse Atia for the rest of her life, and then commits suicide, leaving Atia in shock. The trio of Octavian, Antony and Lepidus discuss the new ruling arrangements over Rome. They decide to divide the empire into 3 administrative portions and share all revenue equally. When Pascha, upset with Antony over the latter's refusal to share a portion of his bribe money, secretly informs Octavian that Antony is hoarding tribute, the triumvirate comes close to civil war again. Some last-minute negotiations preserve its unity, and to strengthen the bond, Atia proposes a marriage between Antony and the house of the Julii, thus also accomplishing her personal desire to wed Antony. However, Antony and Octavian privately agree that Octavian's sister, Octavia, and not Atia, will be wed to Antony, as it is a more acceptable symbol of the political union. A devastated Atia begins to wonder if Servilia's curse has come true, while Agrippa and Octavia exchange distraught glances at the extravagant wedding. The Jewish prince Herod visits Rome seeking an alliance. Levi regards him as traitor to the people of Judea and convinces Timon that they should kill him at Antony's wedding, even though they know they are certain to lose their own lives in the process. Timon swears an oath on the Torah, but changes his mind at the last minute. He argues that killing Herod will accomplish nothing, and he also has a family to think of. Levi calls him a coward and starts out alone. Timon wrestles him back, and in the ensuing struggle, accidentally stabs his brother dead. Vorina the elder is seduced by Memio's man on his orders. Memio catches them having sex and pretends to be angry with her, saying that he will have to tell Vorina's father and his business friend, Vorenus, about the relationship, which will probably result in severe punishment for Vorina. Vorina begs him to remain silent and he agrees on the condition that Vorina spy on her father and report his actions to Memio. She agrees willingly, and lies when she is caught in the act by Vorenus. Irene complains to Polo of the slave Gaia's constant abuse, laziness and threats towards her. An angry Polo debates whether to wait for Macius, away on business, to punish his woman but eventually decides to do it himself. As he confronts Gaia, she tries to seduce him to stop him from beating her in the middle of a violent argument, and Polo ends up having sex with Gaia. A guilty Polo promises that it will never happen again, but does not come clean to Irene, who happily notes that Gaia's behavior has improved since the thrashing. At the end of the episode, Gaia is seen purchasing some abortifacients, but her smile as the episode ends implies it is not meant for her. Prince Herod has shipped in a secret consignment of gold for the triumvirate, and Octavian instructs Lucius Vorenus to oversee its safe passage discreetly into Rome. Vorenus delegates the task to Titus Pullo, who is known and trusted by both Octavian and Mark Antony, much to the ire of Vorenus' third man, Macius. However, Gaia poisons Irene's tea, causing Irene to die in childbirth with a stillborn baby boy. Pullo is incapacitated with grief, so Macius takes over the operation. An ambush results in the theft of the gold and the near death of Macius. As accusations fly, Maecenas is convinced that Antony and Pascha are the culprits. He had earlier plotted with Pascha to steal a portion of the gold for themselves, but now believes that he has been double-crossed. He exacts his revenge by revealing to Octavian that sexual relations still exist between Antony and Atia, and Octavia the Younger and Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa. Octavian, who has just given a grand public speech on the virtue of Roman women, is outraged and confronts his family. First, he calmly introduces his new wife, Livia Drusilla, who is divorcing her current husband Tiberius Nero to marry him. He then wrathfully reveals that he knows of the lack of virtue of the women of his own house. He threatens to make Antony the laughingstock of Rome by revealing his wife's shameful infidelity with Octavia to the plebs if he does not leave for Alexandria at once. He also barricades Atia and Octavia inside the house. He forgives Agrippa, who later breaks off relations with Octavia to stay loyal to Octavian. Octavia, who wanted to run away with him, angrily calls him a coward and reveals that she is pregnant, but is unsure and uncaring of the identity of the father. Antony leaves for Egypt after promising Atia that he will call for her when the time is right, and meets a seductively dressed Cleopatra VII in her palace. Vorenus pledges to retrieve the gold and pays Memio a visit. A smug Memio hints that not only has he stolen the gold but that one of Vorenus's own men betrayed him. Vorenus and Pullo initially suspect Macius, but Vorenus catches his children playing with a straw toy that he saw in the hands of one of Memio's men, the same one that seduced Verena. He confronts her and she admits to betraying him, and screams that she was glad to do so. Flying into a rage, she accuses him of killing her mother, Niobe, abandoning his children in hell, and forcing her to prostitute herself. Vorenus is shocked to learn that his children have hated him all along, and becomes violent with Verena. He starts choking her after she pulls a knife on him but stops when Pullo points out that the younger children are watching. Unashamed and devastated, Vorenus tells Antony that his gold has been located and will be retrieved, but that he himself will be resigning from the Aventine Collegium and asks Antony to take him to Egypt with him, since he has already sworn an oath of loyalty until death to Antony. Pullo will take care of his children, the Aventine and the mission to retrieve the gold. Meanwhile, Memio uses the stolen gold to buy the loyalties of the other Collegium members and forms an alliance against Vorenus. When the rival gangs converge, Vorenus has left and Pullo leads the Aventine. Memio asks for a parley with Pullo and offers reconciliation, since his argument was with Vorenus, not Pullo. In answer, Pullo bites out Memio's tongue, hurls an axe at Vorenus' would-be lover among Memio's men, and leads the Aventine Collegium into battle against the other gangs. The Aventine fights ferociously, with Gaia and Pullo going particularly berserk, and the opposing gangs struggle to rally their men. Rome is facing a dire shortage of grain, forcing Octavian to barter with Mark Antony to get new shipments sent from Egypt. Mark Antony and Cleopatra continually increase their demands in exchange for grain, eventually driving away Octavian's negotiator. In so doing, Antony hopes to push Octavian into declaring war, which Antony believes he can win due to his support among the Roman people. As a last resort to sway public sentiment to his side, Octavian sends Atia and Octavia to Alexandria, knowing that Antony will reject his lover and lawful wife respectively. Caesarion is seen throwing stone balls at a slave before instead asking Lucius Vorenus to play catch with him and tell him what his presumed biological father, Titus Pullo, was really like. Vorenus does so, describing Pullo as a good man, soldier, and horseman but also a bad gambler with a nasty temper who liked to eat. This clashes with what Caesarion has been told, which is that Pullo was not a self-indulgent man. Following many weeks at sea while suffering from seasickness, Octavia and Atia arrive in Alexandria, where they are carried in litters to the gate of the royal palace. To their surprise, they are not met at the gate by anyone and are forced to wait outside in the heat. While they are waiting outside the palace, Jocasta appears, unexpectedly dressed head to toe in Egyptian wear. She explains to Octavia that Cleopatra prefers all the women in court to look this way. Posca then emerges from the palace and awkwardly ushers Jocasta back into the palace, barely breaking words with Octavia and Atia. Octavian's hunch that Antony will reject his lover and his lawful wife are proven correct. Antony refuses to see Atia and Octavia, because he's in the middle of having sex with Cleopatra, and sends them back to Rome. He commands Vorenus to send them away. When Vorenus emerges from the palace to tell her she must go, Atia flies into a rage and strikes at Vorenus multiple times. Vorenus once again demands that they must leave and Atia again refuses to leave until she sees Antony. Atia is finally convinced to leave only after Vorenus threatens to use the Nubian guards to forcibly take her back to the docks. Back at the ship, Octavia throws her wedding ring out of the window and into the ocean. Back inside the palace, Posca and Jocasta have decided to flee the ever-increasing madness of Antony and Cleopatra's court. Posca explains to Jocasta that they must leave nearly everything they have behind if they are to escape Alexandria. Jocasta states that she doesn't care and that she wants to go home. They are suddenly interrupted when Vorenus enters their room. Vorenus realizes that they are planning to defect, but is understanding of their plight and makes it clear that he will not stand in their way. Posca asks Vorenus if he does not wish to accompany them back to Rome, but Vorenus, ever faithful to Antony, politely declines. Posca and Jocasta are able to safely board the Roman ship and make it successfully back to Rome. Posca and Jocasta suddenly arrive at the ship seeking to return to Rome and to flee the ever-increasing madness of Antony and Cleopatra's court. Octavian greets Atia upon her return to Rome and is immediately slapped by his mother for causing her such embarrassment and heartache. She informs Octavian that Posca has something he'd find of interest and then storms off. Posca presents Octavian with the last will and testament of Antony and Cleopatra, which he had stolen before leaving the palace. Maecenas reads it to Octavian. Its contents include Antony naming Cleopatra his wife and planning to give Egypt and the eastern provinces to his children by her, while leaving Rome and the Western Empire to her son by Julius Caesar. Octavian uses this as evidence that Antony has gone mad and has become a threat to the state, spreading the news to the people and gaining the Senate's support in a war against Antony. The people of Rome are enraged that their former hero Antony could have so openly rejected his wife in favor of an Egyptian whore. Public opinion is now solidly in Octavian's camp. Octavian summons Titus Pullo for a personal audience in the Senate house and requests that Pullo come with him to Egypt, hoping that Pullo could reason with Vorenus and mediate for Antony. Pullo expresses his doubts, but agrees to escort Octavian. At the Aventine Collegium, where Pullo is rationing out grain to increasingly restless Romans, Pullo makes final arrangements with his men and Vorenus' children, and leaves Macius in charge. However, the night before Pullo leaves, he is attacked by Memio, who Pullo had imprisoned in a small cage since his defeat in the gang wars. Memio knocks Pullo unconscious and moves in to kill him with a knife. Gaia intervenes, killing Memio, but is mortally wounded when Memio stabs her in the abdomen. Gaia is being treated by a local doctor. She, aware that she is dying from her multiple stab wounds, confesses to Pullo that she had killed Irene and their unborn baby. Pullo, seething with anger at this revelation, chokes her to death. The next morning he dumps her body unceremoniously into a muddy pool, thereby ensuring to pagan custom that she will never enter the netherworld and her spirit will wander aimlessly in limbo because she has not received proper funeral rites. After losing the Battle of Actium, a vanquished Mark Antony barricades himself with Cleopatra in their palace in Alexandria. The palace becomes a place of never-ending orgies as Mark Antony and Cleopatra drug and drink themselves into a stupor. Octavian sends an emissary to Mark Antony, with a secret message to Lucius Vorenus, offering him amnesty if he will betray Antony and open the palace gates in an attempt to avoid a direct assault on the palace which might lead to a popular uprising. It is made clear that Titus Pullo is aware that Caesarion is his son and that Vorenus also knows this. Mark Antony refuses Octavian's offer of unconditional surrender and challenges Octavian to single combat. Vorenus also refuses to betray Mark Antony. Practice with Vorenus and then with an emasculated courtier shows how much Mark Antony's physical condition has deteriorated alongside his mental condition. Octavian refuses the challenge as barbaric and secretly sends word to Cleopatra offering her the chance to keep the crown of Egypt and save the lives of her children if she gives up Mark Antony. She tricks Mark Antony into believing that she has committed suicide. Vorenus assists in Antony's suicide at his request. Vorenus, shocked to find Cleopatra still alive, tells her that Octavian will keep Mark Antony's children alive as a popular gesture of mercy but will almost certainly kill Caesarion as a potential rival to the rule of Rome. He also reveals his plans to escape with Caesarion in an attempt to keep him alive. It is made clear that Cleopatra knows that Caesarion is actually Titus Pullo's son. Upon meeting Octavian and failing to seduce him as she had Mark Antony, Cleopatra realizes that he wishes to take her kingdom and parade her, alive but in chains, in Rome at his triumph. She commits suicide by clasping an asp to her breast, and as Octavian's soldiers storm her throne room, she dies, telling Octavian with her final breaths, "You have a rotten soul." Vorenus has meanwhile escaped the palace with Caesarion and Titus Pullo is charged by Octavian with finding and killing Caesarion. Vorenus and Pullo meet near where they had previously saved Cleopatra's life in the first season and they discuss plans to escape Egypt. Their escape is thwarted at a Roman roadblock when Caesarion speaks in the manner of the Egyptian court. Although they manage to fight their way out, Vorenus is seriously, perhaps mortally, wounded. He demands that Titus Pullo take him to Rome to die. In Rome, Octavian arrives at his mother's house, bringing with him Cleopatra and Mark Antony's twin children, Cleopatra Selene and Alexander Helios, who he asks Octavia to take under her care. Atia takes the news of Antony's death with satisfaction, but takes little pleasure in her son's success in at last gaining supreme power. Octavia is disturbed by Atia's mood. After a month-long journey, a badly injured Vorenus and Pullo return to Rome for an emotional reunion at the Collegium. On his sickbed, Vorenus is reconciled with his grieving children. Series creator Bruno Heller later revealed that Vorenus did not die after this scene. At the same time, Octavian's triumph is taking place. As Livia and Octavia are about to enter a podium in the Forum, late arrival Atia takes the lead, calling Livia a vicious little trollop, and says, "You're swearing now that someday you will destroy me. But remember that far better women than you have sworn to do the same. Go look for them now." Atia's look, however, is ambiguous as she watches a triumphal float pass by with the masked bodies of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, her lost love and his seducer, as glances are exchanged between Agrippa and Octavia. A month later, Pullo pays Octavian a visit, lying to him about the fate of Caesarion and is rewarded. He also tells him that Vorenus didn't survive his injuries without giving details on how they were inflicted. Leaving Octavian's palace, he meets Caesarion, who begins swearing revenge in his wish to claim his rightful throne as Caesar's heir, redeeming my father's name. The series ends with the pair disappearing into a crowded Roman street as Titus Pullo puts his arm around Caesarion and says, "Listen, about your father.